bring her in.
So it appears Thursday is the most popular day for downloading a podcast.
Thursday is, huh?
Okay.
Thursday. Yeah. That's what some research that just came out saying. Yeah, it used to be Tuesday and Wednesday, but now it looks like it's Thursday.
I have someone managing an Instagram account, and she manages the stats on her phone. And Arika, I'm just going to mute you for a second. She was like, "Oh, you checked this page for the stats," and I opened it up on my own iPad, and I was like, "Oh, these stats," and they were totally different stats than on hers. Like hers said that the most popular time for people to see the posts was like Tuesday and Thursdays, and mine said Monday, Wednesday, Friday or something. It was just, we were like, what's going on with Instagram?
Well, but it could be based on who's seeing your post versus who's seeing hers, or no?
No, she's managing
managing your account. Yeah.
Instagram. Yeah.
Hey, Rob. So on that point of, I've always kind of struggled with that. Obviously, I'm of the old school where you released podcast episodes every Monday morning, and I've stayed with that cadence. But then Wednesday, I knew about. My question is, what's your thoughts on, if Thursday is so popular, do I not want to be on Thursday release because I'm competing with too many others?
I mean, common sense would tell me that a little earlier in the week is better, because then it gives people more time to get into your episode. I would think if you're publishing on Thursday, you're only giving your listeners probably a day before the weekend, right? So, so common sense would tell me that you probably want to put out on Monday or Tuesday, like you're saying. I don't know why that would be less advantageous than putting it out on Thursday, when that gives the listener less time, unless your audience is listening to your show on the weekends, which the stats don't really support that.
Yeah.
Right.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Should we hop into some content here for
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Great. I'll give a little introduction quickly to what we did last week and kind of where we're at. Last week we had Heather Osgood, and she is with True Native Media, and they help people podcasts connect with advertisers and vice versa. And today, basically what we're doing is we're going to be following up on what we covered on that session, just talking amongst us, the host, talking about advertising, our experience with advertising, how you might go about getting advertising, and other related topics. Reminder for everyone out there who's just joining, it's a business podcast mastermind that was started by a few friends in the business podcasting space who expanded it to create a weekly event where a wider audience can join. We've got Rob Green-Lee, who's the VP of Content and Partnerships at Libsyn and chair of the Podcast Academy, as well as co-host of the True Native Media Show, the new media show.
The new media show, right.
It's right behind him there now.
True. Right. I've got, unfortunately, I'm not looking at him, trying to read it off the, anyways, that's enough of that. He's a co-host of the new media show. Henry Lopez, serial entrepreneur, small business coach, hosted the top-rated How a Business podcast. Very invested in helping people start their businesses. Vinay Koshi, host of the Predictable B2B podcast and founder of Sproutworth. He works on content creation, content marketing, blog management solutions, help people with their businesses. I'm Ethan Janney, co-host of the Run With It podcast. We have 7+ figure entrepreneurs on that show giving their business ideas to our listeners, and I also am a coach. So without further ado, we can start launching into discussing advertising. And Arika, I see you're over here in the group. Oh, you're filming on a noisy set at the moment, so sadly you can't join the discussion. No problem. So what we'll do at the moment is we're going to just kind of each jump in with some ideas around this advertising topic. I know, Henry, you said you had some things that you might want to share. I also have some documents I can start to go over. Would you rather I go first, or you want to?
As you wish. You're moderating, so you let me know.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to start by showing how I looked at your website. So do you mind if I jump to your website to kind of talk about what I'm going to talk about, or is that going to overlap with what you would talk about?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So Henry's up to Do you mind me sharing your download numbers? I think it's right here on your website. So
Yeah, we just hit a record month for me with 55,148 downloads.
that's awesome, man. Very good.
So this year, we had talked about it before. It went down a little bit right when COVID hit in March, and then every month has been on an upward trend. And I think a lot of people, certainly in the business space, are seeing that. So not surprising. And I'm also seeing, obviously, correlated to that, a lot of activity on people wanting to start a business.
Excellent. Very good. And next week we'll have on Cortland Allen from the Indie Hackers podcast, who's grown his downloads per month up to 160. So I feel like this is nice too, as like an intermediate place between here and there. We'll get a perspective on him as well next week. But yeah, I want to just talk about me looking at this and then thinking about what I can do. So this isn't really advertising related, but this has been coming up in the past few episodes. We talked about like having a media page. And I think it's useful to just go through it and talk through what you can do if you want to create a media page. I started to create a media page. We don't have one yet for our podcast. So I'm just going to go through and say how I looked at Henry's and started working on my own, so that if you want to do this for yourself, you can take this away. So at the top here, of course, he's got a title for the page. Definitely giving some clear indications to the topics that he's going to cover and the audience that he's going to reach, so that people who are coming to the page are going to know that they're in the right place if they care about entrepreneurship and business. He gives himself a little bio here. He has a section for social media links. He has a section for images that have to do with the logo, but also I'm assuming, if somebody wants to write an article about you, or if they have you on the podcast and they ask for an image, this is an easy place to grab it. And I thought this was really useful. I've seen people say, here are some interview topics I can talk about. But you actually mentioned what are some questions that people might want to ask on that particular topic. So I feel that that's kind of a nice, thorough way to present to people what you can talk about with even more detail, since it's all laid out here. And you had quite a few different ideas. You even had some related content, which I think links back to your own web pages, as well as other appearances you might have been on. And then this is great. We don't have this yet. It's a place where someone can see all the other shows that we've been on. And I was going to say, as we were reviewing guests, I made a comment when somebody reached out, it would have been nice to have more info on what they would be like as a guest. So this is a really great examples here. And then I don't see this very much, but I thought it was cool. You had a timeline, and I think this helped people, particularly in your space, understand your business experience. I don't know that everybody would need to have something like this, but I took note of that, and then finally kind of wrapped it up. And you had some social proof here, showing your podcast among some other popular business podcasts. I also noticed you had a bio up top that was short, but then you also had a full bio. I did not work on a full bio yet, but that seems quite valuable. So I just want to show folks what I started to do for our podcast, to maybe give you some ideas about how you can, get a draft in place so that you can eventually put this up on your site. So I just started with a Google document. I have a co-host, so I shared this with him. I said, hey, take a look at Henry's page. Just the basics. I put a spine in there, right? What's the title going to be? Here's the host names. Because we have two hosts, I gave a little short bio of us together in the podcast, made sure I got some images together that people could use that feature images of us as podcast hosts. We actually didn't have that many. So I just went, as at least a placeholder, I went to some of our video episodes and grabbed some screenshots, grabbed some logos and things like that. It's kind of just a nice exercise, even if you're not looking to get on other shows, of cataloging what information you have. Chris still has to fill in his bio. I came up with some, like a nice kind of I don't know, like a tagline for who's Chris, right? Why would he make a good guest? Corporate chemical engineer, now successfully self-employed and rapidly expanding his horizons. Maybe some features of who he is: a successful corporate escapee, a calculated risk taker, imperfectionist with high standards, place for his social media, some more images, place where you can put topics, recent appearances, timeline, kind of all the things that Henry has there. We can at least try and put them down. And then for myself, I was able to go into more detail on these particular things: photos, bios, gave me a reason to get all my social media links together. And I had some emails that I had sent out previously telling people, hey, here's a topic. But I thought this was a great idea. So I've got a bunch of topics that I can talk about when I'm on podcasts, and then I'll go and take another step, hopefully, and do what Henry did and give people some questions that I would feel confident answering. I said, oh, hey, what are all the podcasts I've been on so far? Got some links together there. And I thought it was interesting, at least to try that, a timeline exercise. I think maybe, and you could speak to this, Henry, you put that more for, hey, here's a proof of my business experience. But maybe just for people's background, if they want to know where I come from, what kind of things they can talk to me about. I tried to put in some relevant points from my history that people might care about, if they were going to interview me on another podcast. So that's a lot of info. And I also have a little exercise based on Henry's content. I'm borrowing a lot from it, about creating a page for advertisers. I just want to cut out here and see if anybody had anything they want to share at this point. I've been talking for a little bit. Oh, you're muted, I think, Rob.
I think it's also good to have like a PDF. I mean, it's good if you can have something that's as brief as possible too. Like a couple of pages. If you think about a resume, I mean, you have to be realistic about how much people are going to actually look at or read, and brevity could be an important piece of this too. So just try and maybe have all the information on your website, but if you create a PDF, just take the highlights out of it, of what's really important to an advertiser to make a decision about choosing your podcast.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And this particular one too, this was like a media page more for maybe guesting on other podcasts and so forth. But
right. It can have a dual purpose, right?
Yeah, I do have a separate page on sponsors, but I get what you're saying. I had gone away from the one sheet, but I could use it to summarize, is what you're saying, Rob.
Right. So, if you look at what an advertiser is really looking for to make a decision about whether or not to consider buying advertising, there's some key things that they're looking for, right? And that's reach and targeting on the demographic match of the company with their products. I mean, so those are kind of key things that they're looking for: is scale, reach. If you can give any examples, it could be anonymous examples of ROI, on a campaign, what the frequency of that campaign was that achieved that ROI. It's almost like a white paper example of what your history has been. If you haven't had any advertising in your show, that's obviously can't do that, but at least give some basis. And selling directly for smaller shows is really the best way to go. I mean, we had Heather on to talk about advertising, but that's only primarily working with Heather, is primarily working with her to sell against larger shows. But if you're just getting started, let's say you have 1,000 downloads or something like that, you can go after your own advertisers.
Yeah. So if you can pull up, Ethan, the page that really is for prospective sponsors, and then I'll share with you my pitch deck as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let me bring that up.
That I use when people inquire. But
here's that page.
Right. So this page is more focused on somebody who might be interested in becoming a sponsor or an affiliate. And if you scroll down, then I think I've got most of what you're talking about, Rob.
Probably,
but I might be missing some things. I've got to update that picture because those are older. Kind of a summary of what my options are, and then who's some featured sponsors and affiliates. at the bottom.
Yep.
So then what I complement that with is somebody, there's some images that aren't coming through there. If
really?
somebody then inquires if you'll give me permission to share, Ethan, if you want me to cover this at this point.
Yeah, go for it.
And I update this on a regular basis.
good.
I usually update it right before I'm going to send it out when somebody requested. So let me share here. Give me a moment. Let me know if you can see this PDF that I have up on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so what I do is, and I've kind of worked with this over time, but I need to add some, just as you were mentioning, need to add some previous sponsors. But so this pitch deck will have summary of what the show is about, the latest stats summary, obviously, overview of the show. Then I've got, again, some more proof here, who our listener is, why podcast sponsorship, my brief bio, link to that media page there.
Mm-hmm.
Then my format. So right now, I used to offer pre-rolls, mid-rolls, and an end roll, but now I'm only doing mid-rolls. So this kind of explains that best I can come up with to graphically represent it. And then it'll include my pricing. I'm up to $150 now. So I'll adjust this depending on the situation. Yeah. So that's got that. And that's it. But I think I need to add a page with some previous advertisers and sponsors.
So when you say that the ad remains on the episode for 90 days, are you using dynamic ad insertion for that, or are you?
I am not.
That's
what I'm guaranteeing them. So on most, if I'm not going through Podman or Podcorn,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having them sign an agreement, and even on those sites, there's terms. But on anywhere where I sign an agreement, I'm saying a minimum of 90 days, and most of them stay on there longer. But I reserve the right to replace those ads, especially when I'm re-releasing episodes, which I'm starting to do now.
Okay, so you're saying that they're buying a campaign against 90 days of your episodes? Is that what you're saying there?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's what I'm getting.
So you're doing what, a new episode a week? Is that how it works out?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now there's some exceptions. I had somebody who I had an issue with that, and so I had to give them 1 year. So I agreed to 1 year.
Right.
With LinkedIn, they're probably assuming there didn't get specified, so they're probably assuming lifetime of that episode.
Right.
But
well, that's probably what it is, right? I mean, it's baked in, right? It's in the.
It is, unless I update that
right.
episode, right?
Right.
Or in the case of, since most of my listeners are consuming on Apple Podcasts, Apple iTunes, and there's a limit of 300, now I'm starting to re-release those back catalog episodes, and there I'm likely am removing the sponsorship if I can.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, going back to where we're at, Ethan, this complements then if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I want to learn more, then this is what I send them via email.
Got it. Just curious if you don't mind sharing, you said you're up to 145 for the sponsors. Did you start, was there how low did you start? Was it?
I think I was trying to kind of cobble some numbers and go back. So about 2 years or so, maybe 2 years and a half ago, I might have been getting $40 to $50 per episode for a pre, mid, and end thank you.
So you would do 3 then per episode, though?
No, only once. Well, I never had a situation where I sold more than one sponsor on an episode. But I was selling those kind of separately and then bundling them. But I never had a situation where I sold more than one sponsor per episode. And now I won't do that. So
okay. So you would say for $50, I'll actually check in at the beginning, middle, and end and give you a shout out. Okay.
That's right. A proper mid-roll, a pre-roll, which would have been 15 to 30 seconds, and then a thank you at the end. That's what I used to do. The reason I've cut out the pre-roll in part is I've been focusing more and more on getting into it, as opposed to when I listen to shows, I hate the 5 to 6 minute commercials, other stuff. That's just me. And so I've been accelerating how quickly I get into the show.
So what are you
Do we think-
finding of the advertisers that are buying your homepage banner ad package?
Nobody has bought that. So I bundle that in, and I haven't aggressively sold it because it's not really, I don't know that it's worth it.
Right.
So it's included when somebody buys a
Buys a
mid-roll.
sponsor. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
One thing that I do like about the way that you're presenting this is that you have, and this is not from my experience as a podcasting, doing podcasting advertising, but more as like a business coach, is that I find that a valuable approach that people take is to give people tiers to things. And then you find out, like with my coaching, for example, I might have a tier where you get custom notes, where I take special notes and I send them to you after the call. Well, that's interesting that I separated out because, some people really want it and they go, I really want those notes. That's what's valuable to me. And some people are like, I don't really care if you do those notes. So that way I'm not wasting my time doing them,
Right.
if they don't really care. And then if I am doing them, they're paying a premium for it. So I like that you have multiple opportunities, whether or not people are taking advantage of them. That seems like a good idea.
Right. I think what you're speaking to, you're also trying to get them to see value, right, beyond the just the mid-roll,
Right.
for whatever it's worth.
So one thing I'm maybe okay. Oh, okay. No, you cover. You say one sponsor per episode. Yeah, I was just curious if you're telling the advertiser that there isn't going to be a competing sponsor.
One sponsor per episode. I do not say though that it's the only episode released that day. So I may, like today, I released 2 episodes.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Nobody's ever complained about that, but I'm not committing to not having released other episodes. I did get one advertiser back in our sister show that we used to produce, the How Car Washing. I had one advertiser that kind of had an issue with that, but it is what it is.
Do you ever find that your mid-rolls go longer than 60 seconds?
Oh yeah. They're often going way longer than 60. I think I'm probably averaging at about 2 minutes, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, they're really actually about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I could totally believe that. That's 90 seconds is probably the most common.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Of the mid-roll durations, right? Of the host reads, of the live host reads.
Yeah. And it's a host read, but it's not live. Going back to the things we were talking about last
pre-recorded.
week.
It's pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded, exactly. Host read, pre-recorded.
Okay, well, you can control that a little more.
I can, yeah. And so, for most advertisers, this is something that's become a challenge for me here this year with LinkedIn. LinkedIn keeps wanting to change it almost from episode to episode, which is a real pain in the rear end for me.
Right.
Because I like to be able to record that promo at the beginning of the usually mine are they're buying 3 to 6 episodes, something in that range, with one script that's been agreed to up front. And so I record that, and then my producer puts that in there according to the schedule. When I have to record a new promo almost every week, that's hard. I'm only doing it because it's LinkedIn and they've spent a lot of money with me this year.
Yeah.
So, since we're on this, Ethan, I'm sorry, were you going to cover something else? I can get off. Let me stop sharing here.
Was it you're mentioning LinkedIn? You're saying they're a sponsor, or that has to do with when you're putting things on LinkedIn?
They have been a sponsor on my show most of this year. Yeah.
Oh,
LinkedIn Jobs. I'm sorry, to be specific. LinkedIn Jobs has been spending a lot of money on advertising on podcasts. The guest we had 2 guests ago, the first guest we had, she talked about working with LinkedIn, and I suspect she was talking about their LinkedIn Jobs promotion. I might be wrong about that. They've been spending a lot of money with podcast advertisers to promote LinkedIn Jobs.
And in terms of the advertisers that you've worked with so far, you're reaching out to them, they're reaching out to you, or they
all have been inbound, all of them. This year, I really thought, because of COVID, it was going to dry up. And I had kind of, the whole, just to go off on a tangent, this whole thing of sponsors on episodes, I go back and forth on and I'd love to hear Rob's thoughts on this, because, at the point that I'm on now, the reason for my show is not to get rich off of sponsorships. It's to drive my other revenue generators, right? My coaching services, my consulting services, my online course. So am I better off taking those opportunities to promote my stuff or to sell them as sponsorships? Now, it's nice, don't get me wrong. What I'm bringing in sponsorship revenue more than covers my cost of production, but it's not going to get rich anytime soon off of that with my download numbers, right? And for the foreseeable future. So I go back and forth. I block out dates when I'm promoting coaching, for example, and I see it. I see when I run my own promo, I see the spike in free consultations. Yeah. So I went into this year kind of thinking, well, it's going to kind of solve itself because I'm not going to get any sponsorships. And it ended up, I've been booked almost all year. It's good. With several different sponsors.
Yeah. I think on what you're doing there is a really great example of what a lot of podcasts could do. I mean, where you're bringing in about, probably varies a little bit, but around 600 a month, right?
Yeah.
For doing 4 episodes.
Right.
You're exactly right. It's covering most of your costs to actually do the episode and maybe some of the costs on equipment, and definitely covers your hosting costs and probably some of your time. Right. So
it's just the trade-off of where am I undermining myself
on the other side,
doing that versus not using it for what the show is really for. Yeah.
Well, are you still promoting what you're doing in the show along with it?
I think I am. So one of the things I did is I changed up front my one sentence on text biz to 31994. I say to including to schedule your coaching call. So I've adjusted that. So I'm always kind of working on that, and I'll mention it sometimes throughout the show.
Yeah, I would still do that, definitely. Because, I mean, there's no reason why you can't talk about your stuff. I mean, it's, and still have advertisers or one advertiser, especially. I mean, how long are your episodes?
Anywhere from 35 to 60 minutes.
Yeah. I think one advertiser that's actually really great, actually, to only have one advertiser and to still talk about your own stuff. Right. I think it's a good balance.
There's still opportunity there is what you're saying.
Right. And the podcasters are being presented with 2 sides of this equation, right? There's the programmatic stuff, which more and more platforms are starting to embrace, but and then there's like what you're doing, the host read side. So some podcasts are starting to opt into these automated advertising programs, right? That you set, automatic sales and automatic insertion and all that kind of stuff. Oftentimes that can be an okay solution too, but the downside is the CPMs are a lot less. So what would you say is your CPM right now on your campaigns?
So, that's a good question because I wanted to go back to what Heather had talked about. So I'm getting anywhere between 3,200 to 3,500 downloads per episode after 30 days. Right? Okay. So that works out to 43.
Yeah. It's about a $40 CPM.
$40 CPM or so.
That's actually terrific. Yeah. Actually.
And again, I was getting close. So what I do is every time now kind of my strategy is, I'm just going to raise the price. And if they pay for it, great. If they don't, then you know how that always works that right. Whenever you're raising prices on anything. So I was getting maybe in the $100 range with half of those numbers. So I think the opportunity is out there. It's just, we're not going to get rich off of that. But as we've just talked about, it's a great way to cover your production costs, right?
Yeah, I think that you could probably sell your show potentially at pushing closer to the 200 per episode.
I think
range.
So too, based on what I've been seeing here recently. Like I just signed one that got considerably more than that.
Yep.
And, and it was one of those deals through a third party where they're taking a commission. I was like, well, I'm not willing to take the net of that. So, okay, well, just raise it. And it's like, okay, that was easy. So there's obviously a lot more money there that I left on the table. Right.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm sensing as well.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing also just generally is a big shift from when I started doing sponsorships 2.5 years ago. All of the questions seem to be related to traditional radio metrics, right? I'm seeing now more and more people that are reaching out are understanding a lot more what it means to to look at and consider podcast numbers,
Mhm.
especially in the range that I'm in, where I'm not getting millions of downloads, right? I had a podcaster that signed up who asked about ROI, Rob, to that point. I
Mhm.
don't guarantee anything because I don't know how the heck I would do
Yeah,
that.
you can't.
I
Right.
can't. And so I pushed back on that. They still ended up advertising.
So, have you had many of the advertisers be, fairly straight with you on the results on any campaigns?
It'd been hard to get that data or that information.
I
So
would
that,
imagine it
that's
is.
something
Right.
that I don't have a good feel at all. The only thing I've been able to judge is, do they come back? And so I have a couple of them that have come back.
And sometimes they don't want to tell you because
They may not.
then
Well, yeah, that must be it. I think I got to get better though at asking.
they may not want to tell you because then that could drive the
That's a good
CPM
point.
rates up.
Most of them are, the way that most of them are measuring it, LinkedIn included, is a special, a dedicated landing page that I'm promoting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how they're measuring it. Others might be a coupon code, something,
Mhm.
but we certainly want to, for those advertisers or sponsors that are not as experienced, I would definitely recommend that they do that so they can have some level of measure, at least to what traffic we're driving for them.
I was just going to add back to support what Rob said. I mean, just from a third party perspective, you having ads and offer, and promoting your coaching and whatever else you're interested in, it seems like totally fine. I guess it's just a matter of the time spent on it, right? Like you said, maybe you're replacing one for the other. But other than that, I don't think the ads it doesn't feel like ads are going to take away too much from the listener experience. And I would even say, I'll just throw this out there as a slight change of mindset. You got a business podcast, so it might even have a boost to your credibility.
Yeah.
Especially depending on what advertiser you have, okay, hey, so this guy's a businessman and he's even monetizing his podcast. And I will say also, just, I've seen so many people, I'm almost fascinated by how much they're able to create like different revenue streams by every little thing that they're doing. They do a course, and then in the course they have guests that come in and basically teach half the content for them. But those courses those guests are also affiliates. And then if somebody signs up for their course, then they make some money off of that. I mean, I think you can go too far with it, but I think that hosting a business podcast and having advertisers on it, I think it probably could even lend you some credibility. So
yeah, I would have to
part
agree
of
with
it.
that. And then you mentioned something, Ethan, that going back to, I started with, and I think Rob and or Heather talked about this last week, both. I started with affiliate type opportunities. Those are the easiest, I think, to start with. And that would still be my recommendation to someone who isn't getting those inbound requests, is to look for those plenty of opportunities, as you just mentioned, that there are for affiliate type relationships.
Also talk about what your learning process was around actually doing the host reads.
So, I think once I got down a format for it and putting together a script and then going through that process, it doesn't take me too long to record it. I've gotten better at not trying to do it all in one take. Right? So I'll speak a paragraph for a few sentences, take a break, speak, and then clean it up in the edit. So yeah, those are the key things I think I took away from it, that I've learned rather so far.
I got a question here from Deb. She said,
Hey, Deb.
What was the tipping point 2 years ago to entertain sponsorship? She's still low in downloads, but subscribers are increasing steadily. How did Henry decide when it was time to start?
They started reaching out to me, Deb, and I think Rob, I've given a lot of thought to what Rob said maybe a couple shows ago, that certainly that tipping point where my numbers starting to go up kind of hockey stick wise was when I maybe started to focus more on what I really wanted to do with this show and starting to be more selective on who my guests were. But I have not outreached at all. They started finding me. So I've been fortunate in that regard. I have yet to reach out to anybody to ask for sponsorships. Now, I did have some experience with that in our sister podcast, which we have now turned over to the International Car Wash Association. It was in the car wash industry because that was one of the businesses that my partner and I were in. A very niched podcast, very low listener numbers, but a very engaged audience in an industry that had no other options because we were about it as far as a car wash specific podcast. And so there we did do outreach. And so what we did there is we tapped into the network of suppliers and vendors in that industry that we knew and pitched them on this. And we started with a low price point, although there we were getting $300-$400 an episode because there was no benchmark. So there in that show, we did go out and get those sponsors by tapping into those network of people that we knew. And for them, it was almost like, yeah, sure, for $300 or $400 for a couple of ads, no big deal. That's what we found there if you reach the right person, right? Mm-hmm. But again, for the How Business, I was fortunate. It started coming to me, and I have yet to go out to. Now, the only thing I'll take back on that's not entirely true is on some of these platforms like Podman and Podcorn, and a couple of others over time, I have listed my podcast as available. But if that's generated one or two, that would be too many. Most have come inbound because they've found my show and then inquired about sponsorship.
They probably found your media page or your sponsorship page.
It could be. And again, what has happened over time, Deb, SEO of that page over the years of content, I'm getting found. They're finding on Apple Podcast. I was lucky to be stuck on New and Noteworthy before they reformatted the way that iTunes does their categories. And so that has to have helped as far as being found. I'm in the entrepreneurship top, whatever it is, 200. So maybe that helps. I think it's just been a cumulative effect of people starting to find me.
So do you actively put your phone number and your email address out as part of your show at all?
Like online and on the website?
No, actually, in the show itself, do you say, you can send me an email if you want at this address?
No, I send everybody to the howabusiness.com.
Okay.
Yeah, so I get everything through a contact form that's on various
Oh, it
pages.
is. Oh, okay. Okay, it's a contact form on your website.
Contact form, no email. I know people are starting to put emails again on websites, but I had such an issue with spam with that.
Yeah, you can.
Sure. Years ago, I stopped doing that, and I don't have a phone number. So I have two things as call to actions. There are contact forms. So if you're interested in sponsorship, they can fill out a form and then I reply. Some of them have my email because they've gotten it from whatever different sources, but it's not on the website. And then as far as like for my coaching business, there's a button to schedule a free consultation, and that's integrated with Calendly. Mm-hmm. But all of my inbound requests for advertising come in through that form, or they've gotten my email somewhere else.
I'll just make a comment about sponsorship for small audiences. This event that I'm doing weekly, again, it's like 50 to 100 people, maybe 150 sometimes. And I am not looking for sponsors. I'm doing a subscription fee, but I talked to a guy, and I had someone from his company come on just out of interest. I thought it was a great company, and they did an episode. And when I was talking to him, because he has a website and he has sponsors in the industry, and I was just asking him, "Oh, do you think anybody would sponsor this?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know, how much would they spend?" I threw out some numbers. He said, like, well, maybe like 250 or something like that max. So, anyways, we just talked about his brand on that episode that I liked it. I just was really honest. A month later, I got a check for $250 in the mail from him.
Nice.
And, yeah. So I think it's just interesting to remember that even though if you just look generally about podcast advertising or advertising for anything, you're going to say, oh, cost per millions, and they want this big exposure and all this stuff. But then I think you've got a really great case there, Henry, to say, if you have something that's very targeted and people know that they're getting exactly what they want, then sometimes you can even
Yeah.
charge more than
Yeah,
you would if you had more people.
We
Yeah,
were
especially
getting
if you-
more for that show per episode than I'm even getting now. And that
Right.
show was only getting a couple hundred downloads a month per episode at most.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to just jump in here, and this has been
Sure.
absolutely amazing, the input. But I think what I'm hearing is that you set the intention early on that this is where we're going. So to have a pitch page, to be visible, be consistent in your content, even to Ethan's point, just start talking about it.
Mhm.
Then at some point, this is all going to come together and it's going to happen. Versus I've got to wait for a prescribed number of downloads or subscribers, and then you're going to be waiting a very long time. But set the aspiration early, it might happen sooner than what the gurus are saying.
Right. And you're not going to have any audience disappointed that you don't have advertising yet. So, so I wouldn't worry
Hey,
about that.
You know,
Okay.
and Rob has said this, and I can tell you, I get this feedback all the time. I think part of it also is they see that I've been at it for a while now, and
Right.
that is probably the most important thing they see. That they're not investing with someone who's going to fade out, 2 episodes after they sponsor you. So I got to believe that that's a big confidence component for them as well.
So do you take any campaigns that are shorter than 90 days?
Well, that where I'm saying I won't leave it on there for a minimum of 90 days. That'll be less.
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
that.
Are you, I mean, is that a minimum buy for you as a 90-day buy?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So what that meant was that I guarantee that mid-roll is going to stay on that episode for at least 90 days. Not that
Yep.
they have to buy 90 days worth of shows.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Do you have
No,
a minimum
I've sold,
buy?
I don't, but I'm going to start. If I look at this year, looking at my schedule, the least I've sold is 3 episodes.
That's the least. Okay.
But that's just been the way it's worked out.
Okay.
But I would say that I would probably at this point turn down if it was just 1 episode because there's too much work for it.
Well, and the advertiser typically isn't going to get much
That's right.
return on a single episode run.
Agreed.
It takes
Agreed.
frequency to get conversion. So I mean, a lot of the larger campaigns are doing minimum 90-day campaigns.
Got it.
So-
So when you say 90 days, 1 episode a week for 90
For
days or
90
just
days,
spread? Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
right.
Or some kind of sprinkling
Right.
throughout, right?
So it's basically for you, it would be 145 a week from that
Mhm.
advertiser for 90 days.
Yeah.
But
yeah. No, I have nobody come to me with that offer either.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean-
haven't had to turn that down or
I mean,
accept
60
that.
days is probably, that's probably at the minimum that I would
Mhm.
consider, just because if you want to have conversion, I think you need to have at least probably eight impressions minimum out there. And many people will say now that you need 12 impressions to get a conversion on any kind of advertising message to an individual listener. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, a couple other stats here as we're running out of time, and I do have to drop off at the top of the hour. I crunched some fast numbers because Heather had brought this up last week about back catalog, and it's been surprising to me actually.
Right.
In August, I had 50,000 plus downloads, of which, and in August I released 5 episodes,
Mhm.
so that's an average of about 2,780. That only made up. So 13,901 in those 5 episodes. That was only 28% of those total downloads for August. The rest, over 36,000 downloads, was back catalog. Now, I haven't looked at it as to how old those episodes were, but the point is, and then it held again for September. September, record month for me, 55,000 downloads, of which 23% were the 5 episodes released in September.
Mhm.
Now, of course, that last episode of the week, it's kind of, when you slice the numbers, it's kind of hard. But nonetheless, at only 23%, 77% was back catalog. So it's surprising even to me how you've talked about this, Ethan, how when people find your show and they like it, they'll start listening to the back catalog. I have this told to me, just had another coaching call last week, free coaching call. And that's what the person, they're listening to the older episodes. They might cherry pick one because I've got 300 plus, but
Mhm.
people go to that back catalog.
And that's when you start getting into the realm of an advantage around dynamic ad insertion. if you have a program that has a lot of activity in the back catalog, you can trade out the ads and get a higher return.
So
on
would
those.
I be able to say only take a certain age back of the back catalog and do dynamic ad insertion? Is that possible,
Yeah,
or is
yeah.
it all
I
or
mean,
nothing? Or
Yeah, I think shows that I've worked with in the past, what they oftentimes will do is, especially if they're long running shows, let's say they've got 200 episodes in their back catalog, they will go back and remove ads either through a dynamic ad insertion platform like Libsyn's a good example. We have a tool that will enable you to remove an existing ad
oh, really?
automatically and replace it with a new ad. So you don't have to do any editing in the episode. But it also depends on how clean the cuts are between content and advertising, right? So that's one option too, and people can do that across as many episodes as they want to. So let's say they only do it across 100 of their 200 episodes, they can do that, and over time they can add more of them, is what I'm saying. So you don't have to start, like editing all your old episodes or something like that. You can just go in and select 10 or 15 at a time and add those to your pool of campaigns.
Yeah, that's just just my last thought on that is one of my big challenges with auto insertion is that I'm going to get ads that have nothing to do with my audience. Is that something I can control as well?
Yeah, no, I'm talking about doing the same thing you're doing right now, just using dynamic insertion technology.
I see.
One thing that's happening in the market today is people are conflating programmatic advertising with dynamic ad insertion technology.
Got it.
But the dynamic ad insertion technology can be used with pre-recorded host reads. So you don't have to do the programmatic side in dynamic ad insertion, though those things are being bundled out there today. There's platforms out there that are utilizing those two technologies together, but Libsyn's a good example. You can get the dynamic ad insertion technology and use your pre-recorded host reads.
Okay,
so
that's something I have to look into.
Yeah,
I have to drop off. Sorry about that.
Thanks a lot, Henry.
We'll see you guys next week.
It's time.
I'll sign us off Facebook, YouTube. If either of you guys want to hang around for a second, if you can, we can chat a little bit. Otherwise,
Okay.
If you need to go for it.
Okay.